Okay, we're continuing our build up to the All Ireland Senior Football Championship final this weekend. I'm on my little tour through Kerry, and I have to say the drive in here to Gaeltacht was something else. And I'm joined by a Kerry legend and a club legend as well, Dara Ó Cinnéide. How are you, Dara?
I'm great now. Well, nice description there. Nobody around here considers anyone legends or anything like that. You need to have a few more medals, but yeah, it's a nice setting, and you're as far back as you can go. I'd say in West Kerry now at this stage, So and a lot of history in the ground that we're looking out on there, and it's great that we roll out the flags and I suppose the banner supporting our own man Brian O'Begley this week. So that's where we're at in the club this week anyway.
I can imagine. It feels like Land's End out here. It must be, so people on the camera can't see it, but you'll see from Google Images the mountains in the background and the mist, and you've got you're fully on the Wild Atlantic Way. It must be one of the most scenic GA pitches in the country.
Well, you're as close as you possibly can be right where we are right now to the Atlantic, because just over behind the dugout here is the sea, and it's a kind of fierce attraction, always was with underage as well, with teams that used to come to us, and even our most recent opposition here in the County League, once the game is over, they all go into the sea for a swim as well, but I can't say it's usually howling wind and all that, so you've picked a very quiet day. I think the fog is keeping things quiet around here, but yeah, this pitch has been here since the early 1980s, pure community driven effort, and we built a second pitch then about 4 years ago for Comórtas Spell in the Gaeltacht up the road, so we're able to cater for boys and girls, men and women, without any internal arguments and stuff like that. Keeps people happy.
They're serious facilities. As you said, they get lucky with the weather. The flags are waving a little bit over there, but I'd say you've had some unbelievably depressing nights training down here in the howling wind and rain, no doubt.
Yeah, that's a lot of that. We had one of them last night. It was horrible, a horrible night for training. Balls skidding everywhere, wind and everything. But it's the nature of it. I think it's always a big advantage to us when we play games here. We like to think it's a bit like not just Gallerus, it's Galatasaray. It's a horrible place to come to, you'd hope, and it's the kind of thing that we're trying to do. Build again. We're an intermediate club at the moment, and I suppose 20 years ago we'd have been a strong senior club. But we are where we are at the moment. We got promoted back to Division 1 in the County League recently. That's huge around here, and 2 weeks after the All Ireland, this next Sunday is very important for us. Of course, it is. But we're playing the Clifford's club Fossa 2 weeks after the All Ireland. So that's the focus at the moment around here.
For people who aren't familiar, you're the club chairman here of Gaeltacht at the moment. So how do you find that administrative side of it? I'm sure it adds a different layer to the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm involved as a selector as well with the senior team, so you keep the eye in everywhere. It's like your typical rural club, I suppose. You're struggling at AGMs to get fellas to take jobs, and there was so much done for us as kids, on this pitch. It's great to be in a position, that part of your life. I'm in my late 40s now, to be able to give something back, my parents and other people before them did. It's huge. That's the real nature of the GA, and anybody that's listening knows it. It's involved in their local club. This week has been tough with tickets and lack of tickets and such. And it's actually pinching a bit more than it was this time last year. And I suppose it's just the Dublin factor, really. And there's a lot of Dublin tentacles and holiday homes around here as well. So I'm sure they're scooping up a few tickets. But our club membership is strong. And it's great to see that interest. It's great to see. We had the stand about 20 feet away earlier this week, Monday night. We had X amount of tickets to give out, poor enough quality. But everybody that looked or felt entitled for a ticket, I'd like to think, walked away with at least one ticket. And we did our best for them. We could do no more.
Well, as the Merish or the selector with the club here, you have a similar job to Dublin's coaching team and Dublin's Merish Capac Gilroy. Trying to come up with a plan for David Clifford in the club game. I'm sure that's a fun job to have to do.
Yeah, it's a huge dilemma always, because the way when Bernard Brogan was going so well for Dublin years ago, and probably maybe Mark O'Shea might have been our best back at the time, you'd be saying, look, if Mark keeps him to 3 or 4 points in play, he's done a good day's work. With David, in every club game he plays down here in Kerry, it's kind of, if you can keep him to 7 or 8 points, you're doing well enough. We played him in a minor Division 3 final there about, I suppose it's 6 years ago now, or 7 years ago maybe. And I think David kicked about 110, 111, 112 or something like that. Got sent off in the last 2 or 3 minutes. But we had another lad, Brian O'Begley's brother, Rory O'Begley, who went on to play. He's injured at the moment with a cruciate. He kicked 2-7 for us at the other end, and I think we came out on the right side of it. So hopefully in 2 weeks' time now, when we play them in the intermediate championship, they're all Ireland junior champions from last year, so they're a team very much on the up. They have Eamon Fitzmaurice on the sideline, former Kerry manager, who taught and coached all our fellas here as a school teacher inside in Dingle. So I think the familiarity will definitely breed a bit of contempt there.
One thing about All Ireland final, then you mentioned the club. Even I was chatting to Charlie Redmond during the week up at his club Bairns Island in Finglas, and when you have someone, as you say, Brian O'Bugley on the panel, like it adds an extra special element to it. When even for the young kids around this club, I mean, to see a lad who grew up playing on this pitch and grew up in the local area, lining out as a panel member in Ireland final day must be so special.
Yeah, it's huge. We've always had a connection with the Kerry team. When Brian won his All-Ireland medal last year, that was the 50th All-Ireland medal in this club. Obviously, right. The Shays take nearly half of them between Paddy and the three boys. And the fourth O'Shea brother is a selector on the sideline this year, and he was our most successful ever coach in the club here. But Brian won last year, and that made it 50, I think, in counting for us. We're hoping it gets to 51. Ian O'Connor was on the panel as well last year, a great servant to the club here. He's back with us again this year, but Brian is there. We have the posters up and the banners up in support, and Brian is very much clued in as well to what's going on. He played 2 county league games with us earlier on this year, which normally they wouldn't be allowed to do. But in fairness to Jack O'Connor's management, they've been very good when players are coming back from injury to try and use the club to kind of give them a bit of air miles again. And Brian knows exactly the effort the lads are putting in here as well during the course of the year, and I think Brian has matured an awful lot as a footballer as well. He has a great sense of who he is and what constitutes a good club footballer, and he is, as you say, very much an inspiration to a lot of the lads under 7s, 9s, 11s, 13s and 15s and all the way up.
What was that like, this week, All-Ireland final build-up week, like for you as a player? Do you know, when you're chairman, I suppose, and you're dealing with ticket requests and all the rest, but as a player, and even on All-Ireland final day, little things like getting the bus to the stadium and the Garda escort and even walking behind the Artane band, like, are you able to years later recall those moments, or are you just completely in a little psychological bubble for that period?
Yeah, a lot of those years. I would have been 12 years into county Kerry panel, and a lot of it is a blur. I tend to remember underage games better and club games even better. I don't know why, whatever default settings there. And what I do remember of those games, I think I played in 5 All-Ireland finals. We lost 2 of them, but you get little kind of moments. You say, yeah, I remember 97, our first one. There were huge nerves. Didn't sleep the night before or anything like that. That was the year that Maurice Fitz carried a few of us in the forward line to win an All Ireland. But we went to a draw and replay against Galway. Lost to Armagh in 2002, 1-1 in 04 against Mayo, and lost to Tyrone, my last All-Ireland in 05. And every one of them was different. I mean, for the 04 final, for example, now I was struggling with injury all year, and right up to the throw-in, really, I had a problem with my back, and Eamon Fitzmaurice had a problem with his hamstring at the same time. And I remember that being almost a blessing in disguise, because it took the focus away from the event, and even at that stage you're a very mature player. I was 29 years of age, but the focus was getting the injury right, getting right for 3:30 on Sunday, and it was kind of in a perverse way very helpful, because the injury wasn't so bad that you could just you'd have to withdraw, like it was just managing it. And other years then, like in 2002 All-Ireland final against Armagh, I never felt better. I just felt really had a good run of it, great training. I felt diet was right, work was right, everything in the background. There was no noise, and unfortunately we lost the All-Ireland, and unfortunately from our point of view, probably Dara Ó Cinnéide was Kerry captain. We had won the championship the previous year, and we'd have loved to have got him up the steps, in 2002. If nobody would have deserved it more at the time, because Mark and Tomas were on the squad as well. I was the 4th person, and Adol McGarrett was there. There was a big Gaelic contingent in those years. But the Kerry Galway All-Irelands of 2000, the build-up, around here would have been about, there's a few Carrow Row lads, Sean O'Donnell and Sean Ogdepair, Gaelic lads themselves, on either side. The banter was strong and the day job and Radio na Gaelic, to where I work, But most of it really became familiar after a while. There's part of me, wishes I was playing now, and there's part of me very happy that I'm not playing now. The part of me that wishes I was playing now is, in terms of their preparation, they're light years ahead of us. We did some awful stupid stuff, and then in terms of, the part of me is glad I'm not playing, I suppose. I liked catching and kicking, and there's not a lot of that there at the moment. It's just the nature of the game. It changes, it evolves. I'm not saying one is better than the other. As always, as an ex-player, you're looking at the game saying, I wonder how I'd fit in there now as a full forward or as a centre forward, or what would I do. There is a huge premium on athleticism at the moment. It was never my strong point. And that kind of stuff, they're the questions you'd be asking yourself. But the memories of the All-Ireland are kind of a bit of a blur. Winning or losing, you tend to remember the ones you lost more, and the ones we lost by a kick of a ball, a point in 2002, and a goal, I think it was, in 2005. And you'd have a certain amount of regrets there, but they're gone.
2004 as captain must have been must have been special. I mean, that's something that as a kid you can only dream of, and only a select few Gaelic footballers get to experience that. You know, being I guess an All Ireland winning senior captain is something the dreams are made of.
It's the classic cliches, I suppose. It's not something like you kind of end up kind of dreaming about or anything like that, but it becomes a thing when you win a county championship down here in Kerry. It's still one of the old traditions that they give the captaincy to the club or to the divisional team that won it, and it was our second spin of the merry-go-round. As I say, we won the county championship in 01, we won it again in 03. Dara got to be captain in 02, I got to be captain in 04, and it is one of the great privileges of your life. More so for the community as much as anything else, and even kind of internecine squabbling within the district. I'd be from the mountainous region up north, and Dara would be from the med scene. That the approach to Fionn Traw is different approach to the Green, and that would be there even within the club, kind of saying one somebody from the mountainside and somebody from the other side, like, and where we are right here is halfway between the two areas, like, so all that stuff, like, is nice, and it was nice to win it. And it was one of the great privileges to bring the cup back on the Tuesday after the All Ireland to your own community, a small local pub in Boher. They put up marquees, open fields for parking, and that stuff was something you don't forget. There was 7 or 8 bonfires from Dingle all the way out, and Dingle are our local rivals, and that the cooperation that was there was huge. We set aside your differences for the sake of the Kerry team, and that was huge, and it was a huge privilege. Like, and other than that, like, the captaincy was just going up for the toss of a coin and trying to play as well as you can and hopefully collect the cup.
And even, I suppose, getting the couple of fuckle into the speech in the Hogan stand as well. I'm sure it's tradition for most captains anyway, but for someone from the Gaeltacht, it must be even more special, I guess.
Yeah, I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised last year with Sean Shea. A lot of his speech, and hopefully David gets to say a few words hopefully on Sunday, like, but Sean, he was very impressive, I thought, as well, but it was nice. And I think, I really regret the absence of pitch invasions after matches. I think that's one of the highlights of any, All Ireland winning and losing. I was there in 02 under Kieran McGeaney as he lifted the cup, and you're grinning and bearing it, like, but in 04, one of the huge privileges was looking out at the vast expanse of Croke Park, seeing all the Kerry colours, but actually seeing familiar faces moving closer, and they're all Gaeltacht people, West Kerry people, saying, geez, one of our fellas is up there, and we better, listen to him. And seeing that Dara Shea was actually injured for that final, and seeing him directly below me in crutches, like, was very emotional.
You mentioned a couple of Gaeltacht lads with the Galway team. You would have had great battles with them in 2000, for example, in the drawn game, and then the replay as well. But did the sledging ever, I guess, air into a couple of fuckle into a Gaelic territory?
Not really. To be honest with you, and I'm hearing you hear a lot of that with the sledge. Maybe the backs that were marking me thought I wasn't worth sledging or whatever. Like, but even that we were supposed to have a desperate rivalry with Tyrone, but I never saw that. So I'll be honest with you, there was a bit like more robustness than usual. But in terms of sledging, I can't say that it was a thing. It genuinely wasn't. I'm surprised, and you can see it. You don't have to have good ears. You can see it, on the pitch now that it's happening all the time. Like, and it genuinely wasn't a thing. Right. It wasn't a thing. Like, I can not honestly, hand in heart, remember anybody saying something nasty or anything like that. You just got on with it. Like, there was plenty of all heavy hits and late hits and sly hits and jersey pulling and all that stuff. Like, but talking about and talking into your opposition, it was never a thing. Maybe I'm old, but it's nearly 20 years since I was playing at that level. So I don't know. It was genuinely never a thing. And any banter that we would have had, I remember having a pint with Sean Ogdepere after the replay in 2000, and the players' lounge was opened at the time, and I remember he actually wouldn't get served because they said, look, we've stopped serving, and I was after calling around and saying, look, you can have one of mine, like, but he was actually after playing half an hour earlier out on the pitch, that kind of those small little things I do remember. Caltra beat us in the club final, in the All-Ireland club final in 2004. I remember having a few pints with Declan Meehan inside in the players' lounge as well afterwards. My very last game with Kerry, there was a new players' lounge opened, and what you had was Kerry and Tyrone eyeing each other across the ballroom, kind of saying, that tension was there between the teams. There's no doubt about it. Like, but no, in terms of sledging, I have to say I never ever came across it.
It's interesting, especially those Tyrone games, because people have this idea that they were like, I suppose Ricey would have marked the Gooch. Who would have been on yourself most of those games?
In 03 was Cormac McNally and North Mercy and Gavin Devlin part of that game. I think when they were starting to get the upper hand in me, they'd move somebody, they'd move them off me, like, or in 05, I got an early goal off Mickey McGee, but I was cat after that, and I think I finished up on Chris Lawn, Crickle, you know, and I had marked him over the years in league games before Tyrone, before it became successful. So I think that was his last game as well. Like, there was a few of us finished up after that 05 final. Liam Hassett, William Kirby and myself, and I think Peter Canavan and Chris Lawn finished up as well. On the Tyrone side, we were kind of, you know, the two Tyrone lads were probably a bit older, but myself, Liam and William had come through an awful lot together, same age, like, and, you know, it was just a good time. Kerry were on the, you know, are really on the cusp of being very, very good anyway, you know. Kerry kind of gets forgotten. Kerry got to the All-Ireland from every year from 4 to 9, 6 years in a row. That a powerful team, and it was easy to walk away from it because, you know, there was better players coming along, you know.
What was Cormac McAnallen like to have marking you? Known as a sticky marker at the best of times.
Yeah, physically strong, like, and again, like, you know, just pure fair, like, you know, some of the players that I most respect, Darren Fay being number one always. Like, I thought he was an amazing physical horse of a man that could play football as well, and you'd put McAnallen in the same bracket. Quite vocal McAnallen was to his own teammates, you know, kind of, and he'd always be shouting instructions and stuff like that. He was quite a player. Gavin Devlin was the same, like, you know, very vocal. You can see how he's become a good coach afterwards, you know, and they were good footballers, and like that, you had good days and bad days against the same lads. Some days you might kick a couple of pints, other days they wouldn't give you a sniff of it, like.
There's often debate in our office. Owen Sheehan was obviously, of course, fighting the Kerry corner about who was the team of the decade of that noughties period, 2000 to 2010, and I guess that we were even talking about it in Owen's house this morning, the number of finals, as you say, that Kerry got to, as well as the win. So how do you settle that debate?
I always, and it's a conversation I had on a transatlantic flight with Brian McGuigan a number of years ago, like, because he came out after 08 and he said, we have to be the team of the decade now. We've beaten Kerry 3 times in big matches, you know. And I was saying, every year you beat us, you went away the following year. We were always, it was like, you know, the way Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson in Raging Bull, and Jake LaMotta kind of comes over to him eventually and says, you never got us down, like, you know. It's kind of, I don't know which is which in that equation, like, but Tyrone were an amazing team. I don't think they got the credit in 03, including from ourselves. But in 05, wow, what a team. Look at the forward line they had. Look at the forward line they had. You know, it was ridiculous, actually, what they had. Like, and, you know, the less stellar name Ryan Millen had 3 points kicked by half time on Tomas O'Shea, who was heading for Player of the Year. They were a serious team. In 08 I wasn't involved, so I wouldn't comment too much on it. I was a spectator, and, you know, a fairly sad spectator at the end of that game, but we brought the best out of each other all those years, you know, and they changed the way we thought about football. They earned our respect eventually, not even eventually, probably after 03. We didn't like the way they beat us in 03. They played a style of football that in terms, I suppose, in almost established way, we thought wasn't traditional. But every team is doing it now. They're just working hard, and they were a serious team. And I think, you know, in time, Kerry people outside of our playing group even gave them credit for that, you know. And I'd like to think, you know, that those, and it comes to the surface as it did a couple of weeks ago. I was never as up for a game as a supporter as I was a couple of weeks ago. You know, just you get fed up with this nonsense all the time. It's got nothing to do with us anymore. We're not. It's not the Kerry and Tyrone of old. That's 20 years ago. But that rivalry gets created, and it's a good thing. But it can get annoying after a while, like, you know.
Yeah, it seems to linger on and continue on for years. The Dublin rivalry is another one that is clearly historic for many reasons. The 70s and 80s, Kerry having that upper hand. You were actually born in Dublin. Was it a special one for you?
I was, for economic migrancy reasons, I suppose. Yeah, my father worked in London for a number of years in the 60s, and then they were in Dublin, like a lot of people from around here. And my godfather as well is the same way. They've all moved back down since. Right. But I think it was between 70 or 71 and 77. My parents was born and reared in Tala, St. Mark's Parish in Tala. Probably would have been playing with St. Mark's if I was still above there. But yeah, I don't remember. We moved on. I was about 2.5 years of age. My older brother barely remembers it. But yeah, I do get a bit of slagging every now and then, you know, and it's kind of a pub quiz named the Dublin person to lift Sam Maguire for Kerry, and, you know, say Tommy Doyle, I think, was born in Chicago. It doesn't really matter, like, you know. I consider myself very much a Kerry man, and very much a Gaeltacht man, and, you know, it's a huge part of my identity. But yeah, my parents lived, and they loved their years in Dublin. My father played a bit of junior football with Ballymun Kickhams back in the day. I'd say, no, he had a fierce interest in football, but even by his own admission, he wasn't much of a footballer. Like, but he contributed an awful lot to this club in the early years of my development as well. So glad to get back down to the clean air and the open spaces of West Kerry rather than be above in Tala.
Yeah, less pollution down here. I can safely say that. Beyond the 70s and 80s and more modern times, there have been some unbelievable games between Dublin and Kerry, like not least Cluxton's kick in 2011, Shawnee O'Shea's kick last year in the semi-final. But even in 01, the quarter-final games in Thurles, like the drawn game and then the replay. I was just watching the highlights of, I think it was the drawn game the other day. Obviously, Maurice Fitz's sideline is iconic, but I mean, you scored a lovely point in that game. I think you were out in the right-hand touchline, dummied inside, and I think you hit it with the left over the black spot. Like, just unbelievable rivalries and some scores in those games that you must remember fondly.
I remember moments from it again like that. I tend to remember club stuff a bit more. Like, I do remember the Thurles thing. I do remember the Dubs complaining and ringing in live line saying that it was awful far down the country to be travelling, like, and you're kind of going, yeah, it works the same other ways. We have to go to Dublin this weekend. It's a fair old trek. Those two games in Thurles, like, again, you mentioned Maurice Fitz. I mean, what a privilege to play with a player like that. God almighty. The debates that rage even still to this day, the greatest of all time. I hate that debate, like, because you take every game, the next game is always the most important, like, and right now, David Clifford is one of the greatest of all time, but, Maurice Fitz was special, like, that he could just make a ball talk. Played here once in 1999 in a replay again for South Kerry. He broke his leg the same day, actually, and the crowds he just drew in, same way with Clifford draws them now, just a great player, like, and again, fellas that kind of transcend the game in a way, even coming out of last year's All-Ireland final, I remember saying, it was a decent game, Kerry and Galway, but I said in 20 years' time we're going to be talking about Shane Welch and David Clifford. It's just unfortunate for the other 30-something players that are there, like that, they just elevate it to an art form, like, and that's what happens when these great players, impose themselves on a game. And 2001 was Maurice's time. Those years were, one of the great privileges of my footballing life was to play in the same line of the field as him. Even last year we were the Jubilee team going out on the for the 97 thing, and just even having a 10-minute chat with Maurice in the tunnel before we went out, because we don't meet up that much, and it's unusual to play with a hero of yours, on the same team, like, but to us Maurice was a hero, like.
He certainly made that ball talk, Maurice, in 01, and that from that sideline ball. Tommy Carr was doing a lot of talking that day as well.
There was a bit of stuff going on. Even if you remember, Vinnie Murphy was a sub for Dublin at the time, and he came on, and there was a bit of banter. Vinnie famously came down to Kearns O'Reilly's in Kerry a couple of years previously, and probably expected to get on the Kerry team and stuff, and found it hard. And was one of the best club forwards in the county at the time. Would have been in direct opposition to myself, I suppose, as a full forward in those years, and maybe there was a perception that he should have got a fair crack at it and stuff like that. But we were quite happy to have won in '97, and and Vinny was still in Kerry in those years and was burning it up down here in Kerry, like. But when he came on in Semple Stadium in '01, then he got a bit of a treatment, and because he lifted the crowd so much, he was kind of a cult hero with the Dublin following, and they drew with us that day, and Vinny had a big part in their comeback that day, kind of horsing into fellas and catching the ball, and making his presence felt there, like. But in the replay, I think even though Tomas Shea got sent off the same day, we were probably the better team. But the rivalry, we used to hear a lot about the rivalry. We didn't have a huge rivalry with Dublin in those years, because it was the Armaghs, the Tyrones, the Galway and Meath in the earlier part of our time, like that. They were the rivalries that we would have had. Just as I was finishing up, I suppose Dublin were starting to emerge again as a kind of a serious force. But it took until 2011 for them to kind of really, start getting under our skin, because they beat us, and we didn't like that.
I was chatting to the Dublin publican Sean Potts during the week, and he was saying that the great Paddy O'Shea from this very club once told, he was slagging him after Dublin beat Tyrone in the '95 final, and said, if you want an All-Ireland that counts, you have to beat Kerry in the final. And look, this weekend, finally, Dara, we should touch on the latest instalment in that modern rivalry, I guess. How do you see the game going? It's very, very tough to call either way, I think.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, you put on your Kerry spectacles and hat when you talk about, like, let's say next Sunday, and you say, listen, I think we're in a very good place now, barring a few late injuries or a few mishaps like that. We've got a great semi-final to come through. Like, Derry, with about a minute or two to go, we still thought we were going to potentially lose that game. And that's a good semi-final to get. And at the same time, I think there's probably about 5 of the starting team that could say we played up to scratch, you know, and that's again a very good way once you win those games, because there's scope for improvement. And I think that is definitely there. Dublin got something similar against Monaghan, but their game, they were probably home and hosed by about 10 minutes out, you know. Look, the narratives are all there about how Dublin are bringing the band back together. That was always going to happen. It hurt them to lose last year. They don't like that. I'm sure they didn't like losing to Mayo in 2021 as well. But, you know, time and tide catches up. Like Kerry managed to win 3 in a row in 84, 85, 86, and when the same narrative was there about them, you know, that they might squeeze one more out of it. But when they collapsed calamitously in 87 against Cork and didn't reappear for another 10 years properly. And I have a sense that maybe that's where Dublin are at. I don't know. They've some of the greatest players we've ever seen, you know, and again, they've earned our respect over the years, not to be talking them down like that. Not to, you know, I don't think Kerry would ever ahead of a final out of cuteness or anything else. They've won enough to earn our respect, and you know, there is genuine respect for the likes of James McCarthy out there. Stephen Cluxton has changed the game. We'd like to think when Eamon Fitzmaurice was in charge in 2016 that he invented, you know, the press on Cluxton, and that it kind of evolved after that. They brought the best out of us. They finished on top, and you know, 13, 16, 19 even. It was heartbreaking, you know. And the way I look at it, like, you know, and the bigger picture stuff. And again, this is not something that players would be talking about, or Jack O'Connor and the lads would be talking about this week. But and the big picture, the broad canvas, you're looking at. Dublin have taken an awful lot away from us, an awful lot of prestige away from us as a county. Again, it's not something that you'd like talking about before or after a game, like, but every single thing that we hold dear down here in Kerry, Dublin have achieved, you know, and done better than us. You know, they've emulated, and it hurts. It does hurt, and you know, there's part of you hopes that the players get that. You know, the players get that. It's not going to make a blind bit of difference at 3:30 on Sunday, but it's just that little bit extra. I've sensed it even against Tyrone. In the quarter final, that Kerry were hurting, you know, sick of this talk of, oh, this genuine rivalry is there, you know, what about the rivalry when Kerry win, you know, which they had done in 15 and 19. And, you know, we beat Dublin last year by the last kick of the game, and Dublin were missing their best player, and they've brought back 3 or 4 more lads, and they have Pat Gilroy on the sideline. They're seriously stacked coming into this game. But we'd like to think we're stronger as well. And we'd like to think that an All-Ireland win in your locker does make a difference to you as a footballer. And I do think that there's more scope for improvement. I do think there's players in that Kerry team that we've seen a good lot of now, but I think there's more in them. And I think we'll see it again next year and the year after. But it's next Sunday that matters, and it's next Sunday that counts. And I just, you know, I can't see as a Kerry man anything other than a Kerry win. I thought 6 or 7. I thought we were 6 or 7 points a better team than them in the semi-final last year. They played games to work down the clock. Yes, they have got all those players back, and I don't say that out of disrespect to any of them. We respect absolutely what they've achieved in the game, but I just feel, you know, there's a kind of a tide in the affairs of men that comes, and you know, it's Kerry's time now, and they've never done back-to-back under Jack O'Connor. So many other reasons, but you know, you get sick of talking it after a while. Just throw in the ball at 3:30 and let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, listen, touch wood, it's an absolute classic on Sunday at 3:30, as you say. Enjoy the game as best you can, Dara. Gurmagat.
Fáilte